Good evening, everybody. Wow, what a great audience. Hello, Mr. Real. How are you doing?
I'm doing exceptionally well, Mr. Radio Free Mormon. How's life treating you?
Wonderfully. It sounds like you had to think about it for a second there.
No, not at all. Life is good.
You were just thinking about which way you were going to turn your head.
Yeah, for just a brief moment, hey, opposite way. But you think we've got all those habits worked out by now, but depending on what show we're doing, I have to kind of consider what direction I'm looking in. So the newscast, I'm not always in the same spot. Plus, there's three of us. And so it sometimes can be confusing. Folks, welcome, by the way, to Mormonism Live. This is episode 195. We're 5 episodes away from number 200.
Isn't that amazing?
It is. We've been doing this here for quite a while. I also just wanted to say a significant donor stepped up, said they couldn't cover everything that we're sort of missing out on with the donor who needed to drop off for a moment. But it was a significant chunk of that. I'm happy to tell you off the air, but to have a conversation, I don't want to embarrass the person or whatever. And
I'm just finding out about it for the first time myself. Yes,
you are. I found out about it today, and so I thought I would sort of surprise you on the show and let you know. But a donor did step up. They're covering about maybe a third or so of the amount that we need to sort of make up. And then with all the other folks who have stepped up, I would say we've got maybe 2/3, half to 2/3 of it kind of covered. So I just want to say thank you to folks. I do have one technical issue. I'm going to be really quick so we can move on to the show. We've been using the call-in studio. It has a significant delay in it. Call-in studio as an app, which is just a website, or I can do it on my phone. It has an option to do a different way of calling in. And when we do that way, there is no delay. The sound is better. Everything is great, except on my iPhone, it's not a normal phone call. It's an orange bubble up at the top. And I can't figure out, I can get Amazon Music to go to my Bluetooth. I can get my phone calls to go to my Bluetooth. That's all simple. Whatever this orange bubble is processing the sound when you're not on that screen, it won't let me, it gives me no place to send that sound or reroute that sound to the Bluetooth device, which is our Roadcasters that RFM and I use. If I can connect to the Roadcaster via Bluetooth when I'm in the call-in studio on my phone, what they call a web RTC phone call, if I could connect to the Bluetooth, we would have it be flawless. RFM could hear the caller could hear him. As it is presently, I can't do that. And if anybody out there understands how to make all sound, no matter what function it is in an iPhone, be rerouted to the Bluetooth device, that would, I think, solve our problem. So hopefully there's somebody out there that understands technical stuff. RFM, let's move into tonight's episode if you don't have anything else.
No, I feel like you're putting up the bat signal.
I did just put up the bat signal, and hopefully folks will respond. We have a lot of smart people in the audience. Some of them are very IT-oriented, technology savvy, so we'll see what happens. I'm going to take this off the screen. I do want to put up, before we bring our guest on, I want to sort of brag about her for just a moment. We're going to have a conversation tonight with Dr. Julie Hanks. And I just want to note a couple of things about her. She is the author of the Assertiveness Guide for Women, How to Communicate Your Needs, Set Healthy Boundaries, Transform Your Relationships. She's also the author of a CBT workbook for perfectionism. That's on here on Amazon as well. You can get her books. But this quote, I want to start us off before we bring her on. I found this, I think this might have been in another podcast that she had done, or I found it somewhere online. And I just want to read it. We live in a culture where we are taught to rely on external authority for direction, information, and validation. Instead of looking outward, I want you to look inside of yourself to find how you feel and what you want. And when you are true to yourself, you honor your personal authority. And Julie, I'll bring you on now. You'll have to unmute your microphone there. But I just want to note what an incredible quote. Like as I've studied stages of faith and worked out a lot of thoughts in my head about the psychology of transitioning from black and white thinking to sort of nuance. One of the biggest transitions for somebody, and I'll use this language, I'm not imposing it on anybody else, somebody in a high demand fundamentalist religion, one of the biggest transitions is to move from trusting outward authorities to be delivering the truth, even if your insides tell you something is off, to moving to a place where you really trust your inner voice, your intuition, that inner authority that's in you that says, no, darn it, that's not okay. And I just want to say thank you for being an advocate for folks moving to recognizing that that inner voice has deep value, and that in a system where we often have to give up any listening to that voice if it doesn't coincide with what the top leaders of our faith say, and other leaders of other high demand fundamentalist religions, and all religion generally, in all places in life. It might be the Kiwanis Club for that matter. But it really is a difficult thing for people to start to trust that voice. And I just want to say thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm really passionate about people finding their voice and their truth. And I think it's a big part of mental health is taking responsibility for our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome to the show, Dr. Julie Hanks. Is there, I guess I want to give you a moment to sort of introduce yourself. Most people have seen you participating in our live chat. And I think some folks beyond just that have a good feel for who you are and the work that you've done. But before we get started into some of the directions we want to go tonight, would you mind explaining to the audience who you are, what your background is, and why you might be known in this Mormon / post-Mormon space?
Yeah. So I am a therapist. I've been a therapist in Utah for 30 years. I own Wasatch Family Therapy Clinics, and my specialty is women's mental health and the intersection of faith. I'm also a performing songwriter, Julie D. Azevedo. So some of you in the chat in previous episodes we've chatted about music a little bit. So I'm a performing songwriter, and my dad's Lex D. Azevedo. He's fairly well-known LDS musician. So I have a podcast. As you said, I've written books, and I advocate and create. I'm a content creator. I've been blogging for probably 10 years, 12 years. And then on social media, when social media started, I was there, and my Instagram is kind of where people tend to find me these days. But I speak a lot about the intersection of faith and women's empowerment and mental health.
Yeah, awesome. I very much appreciate all of that. And I've been aware of you for some time. And when I started seeing you pop up in our live chat, it may have been maybe 8 to 10 episodes ago. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
Yeah, kind of cool. So I knew right away who you were, and super excited to have you commenting and watching the show.
Oh, thanks. I'm a huge fan, honored to be on the show, and appreciate the work that both of you do.
Excellent. RFM, I want to turn the time over to you for the first section of our show, and let you go for maybe about the next 45 minutes or so, and kind of take this in the directions to throw some things at Julie and see what her thoughts are.
I'm ready. Okay. I'm ready, RFM.
She's very ready. These are not that surprising. These are things that you already know about. But I started to do some research on you in preparation for the show. Of course, I knew who you were, but I wanted to find out more about you, and I did. And when I started Googling your name, I was surprised to find out how many and how quickly Jacob Hansen's videos came up about you. Over at Thoughtful Faith, he really seems to have a thing for you.
Apparently he does. I think 10 videos or something.
Well, he does. And he did one long video about you. I think he did another long video about you. Then he was so excited about it, he cut it up into 8 parts because he wanted to make sure everybody could see the things that he had to say about you. And he was even on with Cardin Ellis once, and Cardin was accusing him of having a thing for you. So, by the way, apparently, listening to what Jacob said about you, even though he claims to have nothing against you, he's never met you, he did let it slip that he has a relative who's left the church, which he blames on you. So there does seem to be a personal factor in this.
I've heard that.
Yes, have you heard that?
I've heard that, yeah. And he thinks I'm a lot more powerful than I think I am.
Yeah.
If I can lead people to make a huge life decision because of my influence, It's pretty powerful.
Mm-hmm. Right, right. Agency is great until it's not great. And then
Yeah.
people are enthralled by you and you have absolute power over them to make them do things.
Yes.
So what I did was I took out a few clips from
Okay.
Jacob talking about you. And there's about 4 of them, and they're no more than a minute long, I think. Some of them are
Okay.
shorter than that. And I wanted to play these for you and then get your takes on them, and along with Bill too as well. So
Great.
what do we have here, Bill? We got the first one ready to go?
I think
Can we
so.
play this? This is
Yep.
his title, by the way. Only wear the garment when you want to. This is his accusation against Julie Hanks in this particular segment.
Here we go. And this has been happening the last couple of shows, but it will kick in, I promise.
Sometimes it never kicks in for me.
She says, this is what Julie Hanks says, your choices in temple garment wearing is your personal decision. And it's like, yeah, that's sort of true, but what's the implication here, Julie? So let's continue.
Okay, like this is like my decision.
Do you see how she says it is my decision? Yeah, we know it is your decision, but what is the right decision?
Yep.
And here's Elder Bednar hitting on that.
Throw down on agency. This is one of the best clips.
I heard someone say, a member of the church who has entered into the baptismal covenant, I have my agency. I can do what I want. You ever heard that? Yeah, you know what the answer is? No, you can't. You don't understand agency.
Okay, hey.
So there's that clip. I promised they'd be short. The thing that struck me about this wasn't so much Bednar, who is just absolutely wackadoodle, but I've seen that clip so many times I've become accustomed to it. It was where he says, yeah, you have your own choice, but you have your own decision, but what is the right decision? And when Jacob says that, I hear him saying, yeah, you have your own decision, but you don't really, because you need to make what he believes is the right decision. What was your take on that, Julie?
Well, it makes no sense to me. Agency means you have a choice. You can't choose one thing if you don't have a choice to choose something else. Like if there's only one choice, that's not agency. So it doesn't make sense to me. And of course, people have a choice. I mean, who else would be making the choice what to put on your body?
Yeah.
Right. Or when or how long or whether modified or not.
Right. And free agency, it used to be free agency. Now it's moral agency. So it's kind of shifted since I've been taught in Mormonism, right? It used to be free agency, choose between good and evil. And now it's moral agency to choose the right.
Yeah. Once you get baptized, you lose your agency. And now you have to do everything that you're told to do by the leaders of the church. It is a desperate gambit, I think, because what is happening is that the church leaders are concerned that people are using their agency more and more in ways that they don't condone, that are contrary to the way they think you should use your agency. Therefore, they're going to say agency is really anti-agency. It's really not agency. You really have to do what it is you're supposed to do. You don't have a freedom of choice. And strangely and ironically, more and more, the LDS Church's theology in this regard is resembling what they teach about Satan's plan that he proposed in the premortal existence, which was, no, you don't have any agency, but I will save you all and give all the glory to me. Give it to me.
Can
Bill?
I just, I just want to add, and you've already hit on it, but I want to take a facet of it and say it more directly, which is up until Elder Bednar and his moral agency / representative agency. By the way, he says free agency isn't in the scriptures. As you pointed out, RFM, representative agency isn't in the scriptures either, Elder Bednar. So you're also making up terms. I want to just note LDS leaders, 70s apostles, prophets, seers, and revelators have for 200 years almost, up until Bednar saying that, have taught that we have free agency. At a minimum, they take off the word free and say agency, but it has been clear in a dozen to 15 general conference talks that what free agency is, and that there must be a choice, and one must not be compelled to make one choice or the other. They must be free to make it. Otherwise, the plan of salvation is thwarted. And here now you have leaders coming along and changing it. And I just want to note, like, you can't just come along and create a new gospel and not at least deal with the fact that the gospel was something different prior to the moment you said that thing. And so, Jacob, yes, you're quoting Bednar, but you're also violating the doctrine of everyone in the church prior to Bednar saying that. Okay, enough of me.
So does what you say, what you said in that clip, Julie, does that go along with the original slide about that we need to make our own decisions based upon our internal authority?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the fact that Jacob thought that that was controversial baffles me, because it's so obvious. Of course, we get to choose our lives. Who that is.
Did somebody accidentally? There we go.
Oh,
You
am I?
accidentally
Did I?
unmuted.
Oh, I was talking. Did you hear any of that? I guess not. So
We heard most of it until the very last few words.
Oh, okay. I don't remember what the last few words were.
What you were
so.
saying was what baffles you is that Jacob finds this controversial.
Oh, right, because it's so obvious.
Yeah. It's like he's trying to pick a fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's spoiling for a fight for some reason. Okay, so now we've got the next clip, and the next clip has to do with I can pray to whomever I want. Once again, that's his slide. And here's the clip.
Any moment. Here it comes.
Here's her post. Someone said, Dr. Julie Hanks, it was told to leaders in our ward that they want to make sure that we don't pray to Heavenly Mother. And this was her response. My personal authority tells me I can pray to whomever I want in my home. Julie, your personal authority tells you what to do rather than, and it's like, oh, well, the brethren say, whatever, in my house, we pray to Heavenly Mother. And that's like, the Lord has specifically instructed us on how to pray in Scripture, and they've warned us about these things. And so,
my take is that our relationship with deity is our relationship, and it's our responsibility. Church leaders get to set boundaries around what happens in official church functions, but they don't have stewardship over what happens in my house.
It's just.
So what I hear Jacob saying there is really this whole idea about having your authority inside of you and an internal authority. He says, Julie keeps saying she has an internal authority, but look at all these external authorities that we're supposed to follow, whether it's Jesus as represented in the scriptures, his interpretation of the Lord's Prayer, or whether it's what the leaders of the church have said here and there across the ages. That's where we have to farm out our moral voice, our internal authority. We have to externalize it. Jacob's all about externalizing that authority.
Yeah.
And I think that's the conflict.
And he's coming from, in Fowler's stages of faith, he's coming from stage 3, which is about external authority, conformity, and following the rules. And I do this kind of transactional. And then when people move into stage 4 and beyond, the authority moves inward. And so he's coming from a totally different frame, which is why he's so baffled.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Bill. I know this is like your specialty, but yeah. And I remember because you talked about this for so long, like 10 years ago, 12 years ago. This was a real big thing for Bill on his podcast. This is when I was listening and we didn't even know each other at the time, but I'm listening to his podcast and he's talking about these Fowler stages of belief. And I'm starting to realize that I'm not losing my mind. This is actually a part of the process. This is supposed to happen. I'm moving forward. I'm not going crazy in the dark night of the soul, right? And so I just wanted to say that one of the other things that Bill had mentioned there is that if you are stage 5, if I understand the stage is correct, if he's 3, then 4 is going to be the dark night of the soul. 5, you're going to be beyond it. And 6, you're, I don't know, Jesus or something. Anyway, but if you're stage 5,
That's about right.
If you're a stage 5, you can understand a stage 3 because you used to be a stage 3. So you can identify exactly where he is. Whereas when he's looking at you, he has no clue about you. He's never been where you are. He probably prays that he will never become where you are because he sees it as really, really wrong-headed. And you're just a complete enigma to him who has to be called to repentance so you can come from your stage 5 and rejoin him back in stage 3.
Yeah, and that whole series of videos is called The Dangerous Ideas of Dr. Julie Hanks. So he's calling those ideas dangerous. And it's just good mental health to feel in charge of your life and your decisions. And so again, it's that he picks these things that aren't even controversial to critique. It's like, okay, thanks for promoting me, Jacob.
He's doing a great job. I'm not sure who that his sidekick is. He's sort of got a Bucky Barnes there with him. I don't see him that much, but there he is. Anyway, did you want to say anything more about that, either Julie or Bill, before we go on to the next one? Because we've actually got this whole show divided up into 2 parts. This is the first part, and the second part is where Bill's going to talk with you about all the crazy women stuff that the church has been doing just in this past year.
Yeah, the only thing I would add here, RFM, is that Jacob doesn't also, he sort of misses his own blind spots. And what I mean by that is that there are lots of things in the scriptures that he ignores because he's been taught to ignore it. There's lots of things that prophets have said that he ignores because he's been taught to ignore it. And as the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints has changed all over the place, he has run counter to lots of things that have been said in the past. Not necessarily things that have been corrected either, just things that are no longer talked about. And what he chooses and what he doesn't, it with some intention, makes him as much of a cafeteria Mormon as the cafeteria Mormonism that he's critiquing. He also doesn't live by every jot and tittle.
No one does.
No.
Right? No, it's impossible.
It's impossible. And as long as you think it's possible, you can stay in stage 3.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true. I just made that up. My apologies to Fowler. But it just seems to me, as long as you think it's possible to be perfect, you're going to stay in stage 3 until you realize it's impossible. And that will frequently tumble people into stage 4.
Yeah.
Okay. So we got the next one ready. And this one is about the church is not for everyone. Now, this is controversial.
And then I'll just say something here to pass the time for 3 or 4 seconds before it comes on.
And also, I come from the philosophy that the church isn't for everyone. I have family members who they are happier and healthier outside of the church. So I know people who've left and come back, or who, I'm not afraid of that. But if you think leaving the church is the absolute worst thing that anyone could ever do, then yeah, I'm sure that's upsetting if someone happens to follow me and leaves the church and that you want somebody to blame. Okay, but I'm not that powerful.
Yeah, I say it, and members will get so mad at me for saying it, but I think this life is far more about who we are as people rather than what we believe or what organizations we're tied to.
Oh,
There it is again. I mean, same message.
Like what? What?
Yeah, I kept that ending in there because I wanted to
It's so good.
allow Jacob
So
to
good.
express his incredulity over this crazy idea that the church is this is where everybody should be. This is where people can be happy. If you're not in the church, you're not happy, not true happiness. And I remember it was many years ago. Hey, Bill, you remember that friend of mine that came down to visit you at the pawn shop that you mentioned? He's a bit of an elderly gentleman. Yep. I was on the phone with him one day, and I just wanted to ask him this. I said, do you think that the LDS Church is the absolute best place for everybody in the entire world? Do you think it's going to be a good place for everybody in the entire world? And he stopped and he thought about it for a few seconds, and he goes, well, no, probably not.
Right.
Right. I mean, obviously, it can't be the best place for everyone. There's going to be people who are not going to fit. And we know a lot of those people.
Well, the church says itself, like it just told the transgender folks this week that you don't fit. You don't get to come to the things. You have to go to other things. You have to find people to escort you or go into bathrooms alone. You don't belong here. You don't get. So why is Jacob up in arms when the church itself says, sorry, we don't accept you the way you are. You'll have to be something completely different than who you are to be here.
What do you think about that, Julie?
Well, what I'm thinking is, as a therapist, this brings up an interesting dilemma, right? He wants me to have the agenda that everyone should be Mormon, and I should be pointing everyone toward Mormonism. But I, as a mental health professional, I have to be neutral about other people's choices, right? I can't say you should leave or you should go. I would never say that to a client, and I don't say that online because that would be unethical for me to take a stand. I can say what I choose, but I can't tell someone else to. But he's coming from the Mormon mindset that everybody should be Mormon. It's the best place for everyone. That's the only way to be saved. And that's just not what I believe or can say as a professional. That would be unethical for me to say, I think everybody should be Mormon.
Right. Even if you did believe it, even if you were Jacob Hansen with a degree and you were a mental health worker, would it not still be unethical for you to recommend to your clients that they go, you need to start going to church. You need to read the Book of Mormon more. You need to pray more. You need to have more faith.
Right. If they said, I kind of feel like I want to go back to church, I'd say, let's talk about that. Tell me what you think the benefit would be. Okay, that's what you choose. That's great. But we would process it, but I would never tell them what to do. And he really wants me to tell everybody what to do and how to do their lives. And that's just, as a licensed mental health professional, that's unethical for me to do. And I think he cannot grasp that.
Do you think he misunderstands your role as a mental health professional, or if he just thinks that this is the advice everybody should give everybody else, regardless of their profession or the ethics that they're supposed to follow?
I think it's both. I think he totally misunderstands. He thinks I'm an influencer trying to influence people to leave the church, and that's just not the case. I'm indifferent about whether people are in the church or not when I'm acting in a professional role or a professional account on social media.
Would that be any different from when you're a guest on Mormonism Live?
I'm here as Dr. Julie Hanks, so
okay.
I'm here as a mental health professional.
It's hard to separate the two. And honestly, I've said on a number of occasions, Bill will bear me witness, that I really don't care if someone stays in the church or leaves the church. If the church works for somebody, then God bless you. If it doesn't and you leave, God bless you. That I really have no skin in that particular game. I'm not out trying to destroy anybody or any institution. And yet, other people seem to want to put upon me all these motivations that I don't really have. Maybe it's because it makes it easier for me to be a target. What do you think, Bill? Oh, what do you think, Julie?
Oh, I was just going to say that illustrates black and white thinking, right? You're either in or you out. You want people in or you want them out. And someone in the comments is saying it makes Jacob mad that I'm indifferent. And I think that's absolutely true. I'm like, it's not black or white. It's like, you decide. That's your stewardship. So Go ahead, Bill.
Well, the only thing I'll add is that as the church softens up, and again, we just had it sort of retrenching in the last couple of weeks, but in a lot of ways, it has softened up. It's tried to become more mainstream acceptable, tried to relinquish some of its control mechanisms. For instance, letting missionaries call home significantly, exponentially more often. Great change. 1,000 more are needed, but great change. As the church becomes as it becomes softer, I think there's a chance that it becomes soft enough that exponentially less people run into a faith crisis. And I think that's possible. I think we're still 100 years, 200 years away from that. Folks like Jacob Hansen bring it right back into where a faith crisis is almost certainly going to happen at some point, because he is getting his audience all excited about a certain way in which you see the church, a way that when you gain life experience, you realize how messy the history is, you see how much these guys contradict themselves, and how rare, if ever, they see around corners Again, my words, not either of yours. And Jacob then forces Mormonism into a box again, which I think people will break open trying to fit into. And I don't care either one way or the other. People stay, people go. I think the church will be here long after we all take our last breath. But Jacob, I think, certainly isn't hurting the number of people who find programs like Mormonism Live. I think more people find our show because of his show than if there was no Jacob Hansen.
Interesting point. And Julie, you know, when Shakespeare says, "And this above all to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the ninth of the day, thou canst not then be false to any man," everybody sits back and goes, wow, that's really profound. But when you say essentially the same thing, you're a heretic.
Yep, exactly. I'm so glad you quoted Shakespeare. I was hoping that would happen while I'm on as a guest. So
It's an occupational
my dreams have come true.
Well, let's get to this last slide, which is about the family proclamation. And Jacob had titled it, "The Family Proclamation Causes Harm."
And here we go.
Okay.
So yeah, I disagree with, there's a paragraph that I disagree with. Are there lots that I agree with? Yeah. I think it's awesome. Like, we are children of heavenly parents. Amen. You know, family is important. That's great. There's a lot of the thing, you know, you should play together. You should do wholesome activity. Like, great. I love it. And there are things.
This reminds me of the clip. I don't know if you have it, but there's a clip of Elder President Eyring back in the day where he's basically like, there are people in the church who, when prophets speak, if it is convenient to them.
Let's continue.
Do you have that?
I do have it. It'll come up. I don't know if it comes up here, but we'll see it eventually.
It's this exactly.
Things in it that create a lot of pain and that hurt people, and I'm not a fan of that. Because
this is another theme you're going to notice with her. If it hurts people, meaning if it makes them uncomfortable, and believe me, like, that's one of the things about the gospel. Like, you learn about the ideals of the gospel and it makes you very uncomfortable. You begin to realize your own sin. There's this great quote by C.S. Lewis that says the gospel doesn't start in comfort. It's ultimately very comforting, but it doesn't start there. It starts in immense discomfort when you realize how far short of the moral law you actually are and how incredibly flawed you are. But that's the first part of the gospel. And if you don't get the first part, if you don't get the discomfort, the second part will never speak to you, because you never think you need to be saved unless you realize that you're broken in the first place.
And of course, Jacob quotes a noted Mormon theologian, C.S. Lewis, for that proposition. What interested me was how he took what you said about being hurt, people being hurt by things in the family proclamation, and he immediately translated that and softened it to uncomfortable. Did you notice that? And what did you think about that? Did you mean uncomfortable, or did you mean hurt, like you said?
I meant hurt. I meant suicidal. I meant wondering if their life is worth living, wondering because they're not married, you know, if they have any value as a woman, if they're a gay couple, if they have, you know, there's so much intense pain, life and death pain. And that's what I deal with in my office, is people in crisis. And some of the policies, doctrines, and practices are causing people pain. So I'm not talking about, oh, it's uncomfortable. That is not at all what I'm talking about. And if he could sit where I've sat in my office for 30 years with people sobbing over conference talks or over policies, or, you know, the exclusion policy, or the gospel topics essays, and oh my gosh, I didn't know this. I mean, it is gut-wrenching life, like, it's life and death kind of pain. So I'm not talking about, well, this is uncomfortable, so I don't want to do it. He just has no idea and no idea and very little empathy for the actual lived experiences of people that are harmed by some of the aspects of the church.
Yeah, I think he feels it necessary to take the pain and the this anguish that you've described, and I think he has to reframe it as discomfort. He feels he has to, because he can't allow himself to believe that anything about the church really causes pain and harm to people. You were saying something, Bill? I can't hear you. Are you muted?
Oh, I am. Sorry about that. I wonder if Jacob would apply these same standards to those of other faiths. In other words, lots of religions claim they're true. Lots of religions use the same sort of mechanisms. Now, maybe Mormonism sends kids on missions, but Scientology has the Sea Org, right? Which serves the same sort of purpose. Get the kids, young adults, away from their parents, have them be isolated, sort of ground into them loyalty, sacrifice. And I just wonder if he would justify the unhealthy behaviors in other faiths that are also in Mormonism that he wants to stand behind. He sort of is an anomaly to me, because he never really will tackle the real questions that sit there, and you can sense that he wants to avoid those. But he's got all these workarounds in his head to end up with the church is true, and whatever the leader said most recently, that's the true. Whatever they said before that I used to believe was true, that can't be true anymore. And he somehow makes all that work. And I'm just curious how he would navigate that with other religions. Maybe he would just say they're false. But the trouble is, often their mechanisms are carrying out the same sort of purpose. It's just a different process that gets them there. Anyway, just one of the kind of rambling thoughts in my head as you guys were chatting about that.
Julie, in the time remaining to us, and that means the first segment of the show, I have heard a story about Jacob Hansen that he has such an agenda where you're concerned that he wasn't satisfied with just doing multiple podcasts about you. He actually, is it true he organized a letter writing campaign of some sort?
So I don't know if he organized it, but he participated in it, and it was a lot, also a lot of DesNat people from Twitter. But one of the letters was from Jacob Hansen, and it had his picture, a picture of his family. Yes. So the answer is yes. He wrote to my state president and area authority.
Well, can you tell us a little bit more about this? Was this over a year ago now?
Yeah, it's been, I think, 2 years ago. Yeah, I have the letter in the slides, probably the next slide.
Really? You have the letter itself?
Yeah, keep going.
Oh my
God. Right there.
Okay. Well,
so
Jacob's 2022, so 2 years ago, letter to my state president.
Yeah, so sure. My name is Jacob Hansen. I'm the 36-year-old father of 4, an active Latter-day Saint, and high priest living in Gilbert, Arizona. He doesn't live there anymore. So this is the first time I've ever sent a message like this. As someone who is very active online, I often see a variety of opinions being shared by members of our faith, including things that contradict the church's teachings. Normally, this is not a problem. However, Dr. Julie Hanks, who is in your stake, is a very popular, thanks Jacob, very popular Latter-day Saint influencer on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook with tens of thousands of followers online. She consistently shows a pattern of undermining the positions of the brethren. After prayer and a study of the scriptures on what I should do, I have felt I have a duty to share with you some of the content that has concerned me and many others. In fact, the hashtag Jesus versus Julie has gone viral. That's thanks to the DesNat people, which, yeah, good for them. Viral, as many are shocked at the things an active Latter-day Saint with tens of thousands of followers is posting. I do not presume to have any authority to make any judgment. However, as President Nelson has said, good inspiration is based upon good information. So I felt I should pass along just a sample of what has been posted. And these are not outlier posts. Attached is a small sample of the content she is putting out to thousands of her Latter-day Saint followers. Is this really how such a popular member of the church should be using their voice? I leave this entirely in your hands. I'm not a judge in Israel and only want to provide the information and allow you all to seek the inspiration. Feel free to call me if you have any questions. I was tempted to leave his number on there so everybody could give him a call and ask him some questions, but I blocked that out.
Yeah, that's happened before on the show, and a lot of
Yeah.
people called, but not to him, to somebody else. But
The
that was very
Strengthening
nice.
Church Members Committee.
Yes. We blew up their phone line one day. It was kind of funny, but this is amazing to me. So this is all happening behind your back until, I'm guessing, your stake president contacts you.
Yeah, and he says, I've been receiving a lot of letters, and the area authority has, and then I did a lot of research. I said, I want to see every single letter that was sent. I want to see who it's from, the email address. I'm not going to talk with you about anything unless I have all the information. So this is how I got Jacob's letter. And yeah, nothing happened. I wasn't disciplined. We had an informal meeting, and I believe he ended up calling Jacob's stake president after Jacobs sent him some of his videos that he did about me, and that my stake president said, tell your person to knock it off. Tell Jacob to knock it off.
Well, it may be that the message is passed along. By the way, good for your stake president for being proactive about that and contacting.
Yeah, he was great.
Yeah, I guess that didn't turn out the way Jacob planned, but I did notice.
Yeah, and it wasn't excommunicated either, so nothing happened.
I did notice that all of his videos are over a year old, and when it says a year, it could be a year to 2 years, right? So,
Right.
Nothing more recent. So I guess he's doing what his stake president told him to do.
Yeah. Thank goodness. Leave me alone.
Now, Bill, you had mentioned something else about was that the inclusion of the DesNat part, or was that something else on top of that, Julie?
Yeah, I just wanted to give you a chance, Julie, if you wanted to tell sort of a similar story about DesNat and what they had done and sort of how that ordeal ended, because I think it's a big deal that, you're online, you're a professional therapist, you're doing interviews, you're giving out, conversations about mental well-being. You certainly have to, you can't be two different people. You can't go on a podcast. I mean, you could, but I don't think that'd be a very good choice to go on a podcast and state one set of perspectives and then, in private, professional therapeutic settings, be a completely different sort of voice. People would sort of pick up on the contradiction pretty quickly. So this has happened to you quite a bit as you've shared your voice and shared your thoughts on the things that people struggle with when it comes to mental well-being. Tell us maybe as much as you want to about the DesNat experience.
Yeah, anyone who's on Twitter knows that DesNat is, for some reason, I don't know if it's because I'm a woman or what, but they hate me. It's so funny how much energy people put into this. But there was one anonymous person on Twitter who was calling for proof of my apostasy, and he found out who my stake president was and where my stake offices were, and he was going to take all of this proof of my apostasy to my stake president and call for my excommunication. And in January, I think it was January of 2023, he was planning on that. Some of what he posted had some veiled threats of violence. There was name calling, kind of scary things. And I didn't know who this person was because they were anonymous online, but they knew who I was. So I was kind of afraid. People can say whatever they want about me, but don't mess with my real life. Don't put me or my family in danger, or, come to my ward building or whatever. So, so one of my Instagram community members did some sleuthing and found out the identity of who this person was. And some of the people have identified this person in the comments, and you're right about that, who it is.
Really? Who is it?
Oh yeah. And well, he has a different handle now. Okay. So I got his identity. I got his home address, his stake president, his bishop's information. And I sent all of that to my stake president with all of the screenshots of what he had posted about me and how he had said threatening things and name called and all this stuff. And my stake president called his stake president and said, do you know that this member is part of DesNat and is harassing one of my congregants? And then I also sent the police to his house. And he didn't know I knew who he was. And so now he does, and he laid off. And he said, don't go after her. She has her leaders in her back pocket. So it was kind of, I felt really great that I was able to find out who it was and kind of, protect myself, because that's scary.
Yeah, absolutely. They regularly go up to the line and then they step over it. Sometimes a little bit, sometimes a lot, and they need to be spanked. And
so that was great. And my stake president was amazing, and he agreed that I had to educate him about who DesNat was and why they do what they do, and that they are not following Jesus Christ as they portray or try to portray.
Yeah, brush them back from the plate. That was the expression I was trying to think of. Well, I think that takes care of the first segment, and I think I'm just 3 minutes long. So, Bill, why don't you take over here? And I know Bill wants to go over with you at your suggestion, just this whole host of actions that the church has taken relating to women just in the past year.
Yeah, and I actually want to tie in. Yeah, I want to tie in sort of what you went over, RFM, by a point that you had made, Julie, and are sort of prepping behind the scenes for the show. And you mentioned this briefly, but the NASW, what does that stand for?
National Association of Social Workers. So my license is as a licensed clinical social worker. So I ethically have to abide by the NASW Code of Ethics.
Yeah. And I just want to note this. In the video that Jacob Hansen put out, the clips that RFM uses, and I saw another video that had a whole bunch of other things that were being said too. And Jacob goes over a multitude of points where what you seem to be saying is, in his mind, different than what the brethren are saying. And you've pointed out, and you're pointing it out here, and you pointed out, I guess I'm saying you pointed out in the conversations before sort of the shows, that I have to. This is, even if I wanted to advocate for the things the brethren say, I couldn't, because it violates the code of ethics that you have professionally agreed to in order to hold a license to be able to be a social worker or a therapist to folks who come to you for help. Can you maybe talk about that for just a moment?
Yeah, I'd love to. I was talking with RFM too before, and just saying it's like a defense attorney has to defend people even if they think they're guilty, right? And you could go, that's horrible. How could you defend? It's like, because that is what my job is. And so it, in a way, it's kind of similar. My professional job, and particularly in social work, out of all the mental health professions, there is the value of social justice, right? Advocating for people who are marginalized. That's part of the code of ethics I have to abide by. And so he gets really upset when I do that. But that professionally, that's what I've agreed to do. So I think that's just really important and for people to understand that there's, when you're speaking as a professional, there's a code of ethics that you have to abide by, even if it doesn't support everything that the church is saying or the brethren are saying.
Yeah. And I just want to connect the dots here, which, again, I'll put it in my voice, not what RFM has said, not what Julie has said. But it occurs to me that as Jacob has gone over a multitude of points where Julie has a position and he sees that position as contradictory to the prophets, it is important to note that Julie's position is the collectively agreed upon position of professional therapist about what is the healthiest way in which to work with clients to have the goal of improving their mental health and dealing with them and the world in such a way that these folks are interacting with, so as to respect, as you point out, the dignity and worth of people, importance of human relationships. And I say all that to say this, which is, it seems to not occur to many on that side, but it occurs to me, isn't it strange that in a dozen points, that what prophets, seers, and revelators say is the way in which we're supposed to operate, and the collective agreed upon way in which professional therapists have rules in which they're bound to, that is supposed to be the healthiest way to interact with people and with their experiences with the world, the clients, I mean. It should occur to us that that contradiction might mean something, meaning that maybe the men who set themselves up as prophets, seers, and revelators are wrong over and over and over again about how human beings should act and treat each other, to the extent where if prophets, seers, and revelators were allowed to get their way in therapeutic situations, they would actually violate the code over and over and over and over again. And maybe then what is the most rational decision is to go, maybe they're wrong about human behavior and what we should expect of other people. And maybe it's the collective professional standards of therapists that actually gets it right. And then one must say, if you don't have an insider's lens, one would go, which one is more likely? And almost the entire world would go, probably the professional experts who have been working out these ideas for a long time, and not the leaders of one particular religious faith that claims to be the one true church on the earth. So there's my little rant. Sorry.
Wow. I think you have surpassed yourself in eloquence tonight, Bill. Can you hit your applause button? This one's for you, baby.
Okay, but I think that's self-deprecating at this point. There we go.
No. I mean it sincerely. That was amazing.
All right. Let's turn that off. Okay, so
Can I make a point?
Yes.
They don't get everything wrong, right? Some things they say are actually aligned, and I'm the first to say that, right? The importance of close family relationships, like that is really great. There are quite a few things, but the things that people criticize me for are the things that I point out that don't align with best practices in, for people's mental health and relationships. And so that tends to be where the conflict is. But not everything is misaligned, right? But there are consistently things that are harmful that I feel called and bound to speak about.
So prophets, seers, and revelators violating best practices of the NASW Code of Ethics in lots of ways. Again, not saying it's everything, but in the ways that Jacob was bringing up, because he sees a contradiction, they're violating. Again, they're not his whole separate field, but if they were in the therapy field, they would be violating best practices over and over again. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Let's go forward here. I'm going to put this up on the screen. What am I looking at here, Julie? Oh, I can't hear you, Julie.
These are just samples of what proof that Jacob attached to his email, and his commentary, with his quotes. Like, well, Elder Holland said this, and Dr. Hanks said this. President Eyring said this, and here's what Dr. Hanks said. And then he attaches some things that some desnats on Twitter have corrected my graphics and put put scriptures where I said something else. So we don't have to go through all of these.
That's just more of the same.
Yeah, it's just, modesty is an attitude, blah, blah, blah. And then I said, what you choose to wear is none of anyone's business. And he's like, but modesty. I'm like, great. Yes. If you choose to be modest, that is wonderful. Great. And you can choose to not be.
Jacob is big into costly signaling. That's for sure. Okay. Let's talk. So one of the things that you had brought up in our prep for the show tonight is that over the course of the last year, a lot of things have happened that have involved women in the LDS Church. And lots of these instances have seemed significant to you, certainly seems significant to us and the audience. And we've gone over a lot of these in either our news program, the Mormon Newscast, or here on Mormonism Live. And you sort of brought these all together and said, let's chat for a little while about the impact of these events, and maybe more importantly, what they tell us about what is shifting or moving inside women within the LDS Church. And maybe start us off with this one here.
Yeah, so there was a situation in the Bay Area of California where there was in a stake where the Relief Society leaders sat on the stand with the bishopric or stake presidency, and they were asked by an area authority to not sit on the stand because that is not what that's not what we do in the church. And it really caused a lot of really active women active in the church to be upset, and it felt like like this headline says, a slap in the face, was a quote from one of the women, and so it was abruptly discontinued, and so it made the news. It made Salt Lake Trib, and I'm sure you guys covered it, and I talked about it a lot on social media, and there's some social media accounts that talk about it, but it feels like an attempt, women getting a little bit of like acknowledgement or recognition for their contribution, and then yanking it away. Like, well, no, we don't do that. And so I know this was very upsetting to a lot of women that I talk with online. So this happened in November and caused quite a stir online, and I think it illustrates the tension of like women pushing or asking and wanting more from the church, and then the church kind of, putting no, that's too far. That's too far. You can't do that.
Yeah, and women responded here when this happened. There was sort of some collective raised voices from women, and sort of is the wrong word, just frustrated with this whole thing. And it wasn't the only event. Is this part of the same thing?
No, this is in March. So that was in November. Another really interesting women's issue happened in March, and it was. Do you want to play this quote or play the video first?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Here we go.
There is no other religious organization in the world that I know of that has so broadly given power and authority to women. There are religions that ordain some women to positions such as priests and pastors, but very few relative to the number of women in their congregations receive that authority that their church gives them. By contrast, all women 18 years and older in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints who choose a covenant relationship with God in the house of the Lord are endowed with priesthood power directly from God. And as we serve in whatever calling or assignment, including ministering assignments, we are given priesthood authority to carry out those responsibilities. My dear sisters, you belong to a church which offers all its women priesthood power and authority from God. Nevertheless, just as he tried to do with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden with the tree of life, the adversary wants to focus our attention on what we haven't been given and blind us to all that we have been given. Generations coming after us will be influenced by the choices we.
Yeah, I think you can cut it there. So So a quote from that talk was posted on Instagram soon after, and it was from a women's worldwide devotional. And I think I have on the next slide the actual Instagram post. It was the quote that no other religious organizations in the world has so broadly given power and authority that I know of have given so power and authority to women. And as you can see, there were, almost 70,000 likes, 17,000 comments. And what was so, I think, monumental about this event was there was a discussion happening by women across the faith spectrum on churchofjesuschrist.org Instagram and Facebook page, on their official page. And there's really no way for women's voices to be heard by the official church. And this went on for like well over a week, multiple threads on this one post. And I included here what I posted on that. Would you like me to read that, or do one of you want to read that?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yes, priesthood power is given to women in the LDS Church through setting apart for callings and through the endowment, but it's only granted through men by men. Men decide the callings, men must sign your temple recommend, men perform the endowment with the exception of washing and anointing. Please clarify what priesthood authority actually means. What authority do LDS women have? We can serve in callings, serve in families and communities, and pray, which everyone can do. Last year, my daughter asked me to officiate her civil wedding. I was ordained on the internet through American Marriage Ministers with the power and authority to perform my daughter's wedding. It was so touching and such an honor to be an integral part of my daughter's special day, something that couldn't happen in my church because I'm a woman. It's heartbreaking that our Heavenly Mother, our eternal prototype, was not mentioned once in Women's Conference. Until we recognize equality of heavenly parents, we will not have equality in the organization of the church or in families.
It strikes me that what she's saying here is this idea that there's this invisible thing that is not provable, that women in the LDS Church have more power and authority than women in other faiths, at least generally, and if not most of them specifically, right? So my question would be, what does that look like outwardly? What can women in the LDS Church do that women in other faiths cannot? And I can't really come up with anything. It's an invisible thing that she's speaking of that can't be tested, because women with power and authority in the LDS Church can't do anything more with that power and authority than women without the power and authority do in other churches.
Well, they can do endowments in the temple, which is where women get the power and authority. But like I said, you can't do anything with it that anybody else, that's different than what anybody else can do. So on this, women like from all across the faith spectrum were saying, yeah, no, this is not our experience at all. I'm an active Mormon, or I'm the Relief Society president, or I'm a former Mormon, or whatever. Everyone came out to be a part of this conversation saying, like, this is not the experience of women in the church. And thousands. And I mean, on my thread, I think there were thousands of comments just on my one comment. And again, it's historic because it was happening on the church's Instagram and Facebook, on their page, not on my page or someone else's page. And I'd never seen that happen before with such passion and conviction.
Yeah. And then there are other events too. So a couple of other ones that sort of come up in this is the church seemed like it was starting to relax a little bit about garments. And folks may not know this, but you can find this out if you read Devery Anderson's, I forget what the name of the title is, but it's on the development of the temple. And it goes through all the changes that have happened in the temple since the initiation back in Nauvoo in the 1840s. And there was an episode in church history where the leaders at the time were talking about reducing the garment to something only being worn in the temple. And there was one leader, it might have been Joseph F. Smith or Joseph Fielding Smith, one of those two, I believe. But one of them put their foot down and said, nope. And by the time he said no, some of the wives have already heard the rumor and they had gone out and bought their own underwear. And they ended up not being able to wear them because one leader put his foot down and said, we are not going to make this shift. The garment is a crucial thing to wear night and day. And so you see in the modern moment, the church started to relax a little bit. It had changed the way it was framed in the temple questions. And it had seemed like it was going to let people sort of make their own decision and allow a couple of decades of that and then move on to whatever new position they wanted, which would, in my mind, if you just don't get in a pinch over other people's underwear. But then we see over the last year, the church has re-emphasized that the garment is to be worn night and day. So I want you to talk about that one. And then I also want to mention one other one here, which is we get in the church, I forget the sister's name off the top of my head, but she stands forward and says, hey, I worked in the workplace all my life and we should follow the prophet. And yet her way of living her life contradicted all of these women in Mormonism who had made the sacrifice to be an at-home mom when maybe their inner authority was suggesting that it would have been healthier for them to have done something else. And they did it anyway. And these women were collectively pissed that suddenly we're sort of rewriting history and making it so that women could have worked in the workforce all along. And I have a good friend, by the way, who her mom says, oh, no, we always taught you could work out in the workplace. And the mom does this with everything. Oh, no, we were always taught it was a seer stone, And she's like, Mom, are you kidding me? The reason I stayed home was because you told me this is what the church expects. And I remember joining the church in 1996 and learning constantly, every other week, it seemed like at the time, that there was some talk in church, some lesson manual, some quote being used that was nudging women to be at-home moms and to avoid working out in the world. And so maybe talk for a moment about those two events.
Yeah. Do you want to show any clips or the?
Yeah, we can do that. Let's put this one up.
Okay.
And I'm really sorry, folks, for the internet. Whatever reason running slow, I'll reset my computer before the show next go around. But here is that talk.
Camille Johnson.
There we go. Thank you.
I pursued an education, both undergraduate and a law degree. I was married midway through my legal education. I had my first son the year after I passed the bar exam. I had babies, and my husband and I loved and nurtured them while we were both working. It was busy, sometimes hectic. We were stretched and sometimes tired. I supported him and he supported me. Family was and still is our top priority. My husband and I sought inspiration in these choices and in the timing. It was what we felt impressed to do. We were trying to let him prevail. From a financial and professional perspective, it would have made sense to put off having children until I was more established in my career. But sisters, in letting him author our stories, we sometimes do things that the world cannot make sense of.
Okay, so yeah, that is Relief Society General President Camille Johnson. And she started out that talk bearing her testimony of the living prophet and that he speaks for Jesus Christ. And he is the prophet for the entire earth. And then she went on to talk about her law career and the challenges of raising a family. And I want to make sure I am not critical of her. I think she actually was the a divorce attorney for a family member of mine. And so she's a lovely person. And I'm really glad that she went to law school and did all of that. And so she posted, on the church's social media account on Instagram, there was a picture of her and the caption. Do you want to show that next one, Bill? So she talked about pursuing an education, and the backlash was, I mean, women were so upset. The word gaslighting was used, not that she had chosen that, but that they didn't feel free to make a choice in the same time frame. And she was, her age would put her in her 20s during the Ezra Taft Benson era and To the Mothers in Zion talk. And so that she was talking about following the prophet and then following personal revelation and getting a law degree. And when all of these women commenting were like, I dropped out of school because of the prophet, I did this, and a lot of them were regretting making that choice because I'm divorced now and I don't have a way to support myself, or I'm empty nester and I don't have meaning in my life, or whatever it is. And so this was another place where it was on the church's social media account where women came out and let their voices be heard. And it was very strong and inspiring. And women were just like, we're not having this. Like, we're not going to let you off the hook. You did not follow the prophet, and you're telling us to follow the prophet.
Yeah.
Right,
And
you're not. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You're
Go
not
ahead,
critical of Camille Johnson, so I will be. I think she's a flaming hypocrite. Do you think that there's any truth in that position?
I think she's in a really tough position. So I'm going to be diplomatic. I think she's in a really tough position. I think in a way it is a huge step forward that someone who had a advanced degree and a family and was a partner in a law firm is the General Relief Society president. Like, I think that's progress. And I totally get why women were so angry and could see it as hypocrisy. Like, I get that, right? Follow the prophet, but I didn't. And I didn't. I consciously chose not to follow the prophet. I was a freshman at BYU when To the Mothers in Zion came out, and I felt in my heart that I needed to do my music, and I wanted to go to grad school and become a therapist, and I consciously chose, like, I am not, but I'll say I didn't follow the prophet, and I'm really grateful that I didn't. In that instance, I went with what my heart was telling me to do, and for me, that was the right thing. And so I'm really proud of President Johnson that she did that. And it is kind of talking out of both sides, right? To say, you should do this, but I didn't.
And Jacob Hansen will criticize you up one side and down the other for not following the prophet, but he will not apply that same standard to Camille Johnson.
Yeah, we'll see.
And it should be noted, I mean, you asked Julie, Dr. Hanks, if she's a hypocrite. I'll say she's a hypocrite, but it's because the system put her in that position. Here's what I mean. Most of the women leaders in the general auxiliaries of the church, again, leaders with leaders above them, they're never really a leader on their own. Going back to the previous conversation we had about power and authority, and these are the only church that has women serving in significant leadership roles. The women that are leading in those general auxiliary positions, a lot of them, the majority of them, come from professional backgrounds. I think Bonnie Cordon being another one, for instance.
Emily Bell Freeman.
Sharon Eubank. These are women who had careers. These are women who went against the prophet's counsel at the time. And what the church has essentially done is, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, it shamed women. 40 years ago, go back further, it shamed women for not choosing to be at-home moms to the extent to where most women chose to be at-home moms when a lot of them wouldn't have chosen that without that pressure. The church then takes the women that disobeyed the leaders, and those are the ones that get promoted into top leadership positions. Hence, you're creating a hypocrisy by the system. And so while she accepted a call, it was those leaders who extended these calls to a lot of women who were professionals and disobeyed the prophet's counsel. And hence the women who never got the chance to serve in any sort of significant leadership calling recognized that what immediately eliminated them was the fact that they were at-home moms following the prophet's counsel.
And I would add to that in the same talk where she talks about everything that she's accomplished in her life going against the counsel of the prophet, she is telling the women of the church that they need to follow the prophet.
Yeah, that's hypocrisy as well. But yes. Okay.
Well, and she also says follow the prophet and follow your own personal revelation. Like, let God prevail in your life. Like, right? So even in that talk, she's saying, follow the prophet and then follow your own personal revelation. So those can be seen as conflicting as well.
Well, doesn't that really mean follow the prophet, but only if you feel like it?
It sort of is that, isn't it? Because if your feelings dictate that you do otherwise, then you did something different because you didn't feel like following the prophet. Yeah. Have fun with that one, Jacob. I want to go back to just for a moment on this garment one. And I want to just ask you, I'm not a woman. I think men have a much easier time with garments for a lot of reasons. And when this happened, I sort of went like, oh, Mormonism, like you're doing it again. You give people the hint, the sort of breath of fresh air, and it looks like you're going to lighten up. And then whatever trial you were allowing that to sort of test, whatever period of like proving ground to see what would happen as you sort of loosened your grip and you realize like, oh, no, we don't like that. Let's go back to every day, night and day, wear the garment. And you've seen it happen. Julie, what are you hearing from women who come to see you as these kinds of conversations take place? Women out in social media or various places. You're at a party and you're talking to folks at a get together. What are women saying in regards to it feeling like they were given some room to make choices here, to use agency, and then a couple of years later, it's that rug is pulled out from under them? And we're right back in the box of doing this thing that isn't always in the best interest of the woman.
Yeah, there's a lot of anger. I think this is going to backfire, honestly. I think it's backfired because women are just like, you know what? No. And I think as women take responsibility for their own choices, some are going to choose not to wear garments. Some are going to choose to wear garments. But I posted this on social media, these little graphics down here, that garments are patterned after men's underwear, not women's underwear, right? They're totally different. So they're, it's like a shirt and boxer shorts, but women's underwear is not a shirt and boxer shorts. And so it is, the crackdown feels like a crackdown on women, about women, modesty, cover your body. It feels very sexist.
For men, LDS garments can very much look like almost identically, except for the markings, as underwear that I could buy at a store. Like you said, boxers and a white Hanes t-shirt undershirt, and I'm essentially wearing the garment without the markings. For women, it is a much bigger sacrifice. It's a much bigger adaptation.
And finding clothing that you can wear. And it seems like I've heard a lot of people say that the newer garments are longer. And so it's really hard to find shorts even that you can wear with the longer garment. And yeah, I think this, like I said, it's gonna backfire. And there was some recent research. I wish I had it pulled up, but I think with the younger generation, there was a high percentage that did not wear the garment every day.
Yeah, in
Like
fact, I
maybe
mean,
50% or something like that.
yeah, and it wasn't, again, we're talking women here, but all you had to do is watch Midnight Mormons and see how Kwaku was dressing up. And I don't know if he's wearing the garment now, but you could see a long period of time there where they had loosened up, and what he was showing up in was like wife beater t-shirts on the show, where you could clearly see he's not wearing the garment. And I think he even appreciated sort of that loosening, where he wasn't going to be held accountable to having to wear that thing night and day. And
Yeah.
but now we're back at it. And
Yeah.
sort of wrapping up this side of the conversation, and I do want to get the phone lines open, so I'm going to start the show here, the call-in part of the show, and bring up that. But would you mind just, I think we've entered an age, 2024, where it's very easy for people to put their voice out. And if somebody doesn't feel good about something, there are platforms in order that folks can share their perspective. And a lot of people can get together in a place and share their perspective. And we live in an information age. And we live in an age where maybe the world as a whole is becoming more autonomous and more listening to their inside voice rather than those outside authorities. What do you think that does? Like, it seems like we're in a really important moment right now in the world and in the church, where the church is going to have to decide if it wants to be uber rigid or whether it wants to really mainstream and become, I've always said, Methodism with a few extra books. Your thoughts?
That was a lot, Bill. Can you like bring it down? Like, what more specifically? What are you asking?
Yeah. What do you think about this moment where people really can share their voice and people will not be stamped out easily, and the church seems to still want things to be done, at least in part, the old-fashioned way? What do
Yeah.
you think happens in this day and age where people can speak up and others can see that people are speaking up and join that?
Yeah, we have seen that, like related to garments. A lot of very well-known LDS influencers do not regularly wear garments on their social media account, and millions of people see them. And so it's kind of like, oh, that's an option. And so I think the internet, like, it's never been a better time to be a woman, right? Because women have a voice in a lot of areas where we haven't before. And women can gather and support each other. The mommy blogs, and there's a way of connecting that we haven't had before, and supporting each other. And I think that if the church doesn't take seriously the concerns of women, they will continue to see women leaving in droves. They're, especially young women, the church is the only place left in young people's lives that tell them they can't do something because they're a girl. Those places, at least in the US, don't exist anymore. And so we have to look at that and recognize that that's a huge problem, that younger women are not going to have it. They're not putting up with the LGBTQ exclusion policies, women not being on decision-making councils. So I just think we're going to be losing more and more of the brightest women who have been affiliated with the church.
Excellent. Folks, the phone lines are open, 662-667-6667 or 662 Mormons. There's also a URL there that you can copy and paste into the browser as well, or you have to type it out, but I can put it into the comments. We'd love to have a couple phone calls, 2 or 3 phone calls if folks do want to chat with Julie or bring something up about either mental well-being, tied into Mormonism, or any of the stuff in regards to what Jacob Hansen has said about Julie, or in regards to the things that have happened sort of in the last year or so. Julie, I guess we kind of make a moment for folks to call in. I'm sitting here thinking about, the family that you come from, you earlier in your life, some of the creative art and music and things that got produced. And then you become a therapist, and you've chosen sort of to put your voice out there and to stick up for the best practices of what is beneficial to people who need therapy, need help, need to work things out. Maybe can you speak for just a moment about when sort of you felt like that maybe shift from an earlier stage of life, maybe you were in Fowler stage 3, to sort of opening up and wanting to do things sort of a different way? Any thoughts there?
Yeah. So I was doing music and therapy together the whole time. In my early life, I led with my music and my therapy was more quiet. And then over time that evolved and shifted where my therapy practice took kind of the front. And it was about 15 years ago. I just really felt, well, I've always been out there. I've always had a public persona to some degree, been out in the public eye. And so but 15 years ago, I felt like I just had the thought, I need to get media experience. I need to stay on top of technology. I need to learn podcasting. I need to blog. I need to stay up and use my voice in some way. And it wasn't, I kind of knew that my passion was LDS women's empowerment, but it kind of became more clear over time. And so it was really following my gut, my intuition, that like there's something that I want to do while I'm on the planet, and I need to develop these media skills in order to do that. And so that's really where it came, how it kind of shifted from music in the forefront to kind of leading with the therapy and women's empowerment.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the first one. Thank you, by the way, for answering that. Let's go to the first phone call here. This might be Cultural Hall, so let's see if that's the case. Cultural Hall, are you there? Hello, how are you?
Yes, sir. I'm doing. How are you tonight?
Good. What's the name? Is this isn't Cultural Hall, is it?
This is Coach.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry, the voice is a little deeper than I remembered it. It's okay. Go ahead, my friend.
Oh, good, man. Yeah, I've got a little sign going on.
Okay.
Taught from my kid who went back to school. Julie, it's so nice to talk to you. I'm glad you're on the. I was calling in just to really respect you for having to deal with Jacob Hansen and all the death stuff on a regular on Twitter scene. So I saw a lot of those people harassing you and arranging those campaigns, and we would constantly tell him that specific person found he was upset that he needed to stop, but he somehow had in his head that you had let a love of his, and he's like a scorned lover who could not stop it. It was just crazy how obsessed he was.
You were cutting out in and out a little bit. Was that cutting out for you, RFM and Bill?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think I got most of your comments. So thank you for your support. Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Sweet.
Yeah, Colts, when are you going to do a hate watch video about Jacob and Julie?
It's on my radar now. A couple with Jacob, and I tried to take a break so people would say that I was obsessed. But I think after hearing this, I got to put it on my list.
Oh yeah, that would be awesome.
Cool.
Thank
well,
you,
thanks.
Cultural.
Good show tonight. Take care.
Okay, take it
Thanks,
easy.
Colts. Get better.
Thanks.
All right, let's find out if this other call is going to have that clicking noise every second and a half. So Here we go. All right, caller, are you there? Eric, is that the name?
I hear that's my name. I hope I'm not clicking.
There's a little clicking noise here too. So if you'll ask your question, and we'll then hang up and let her answer it off the air, off the phone call, I should say.
You bet. And my question is a bit of a preamble. If you guys are able to hear it, please let me know. Okay.
Yep.
Julie, I wanted to start by saying how much I appreciate what you do and respect what you do. I don't mind if I ask you what I think is maybe an uncomfortable question or kind of a difficult question. You know, I wanted to start by saying I think most of us would agree that the LDS Church as an entity, as a core entity, is one of the most powerful lobbyists worldwide against social justice. We see that specifically in its stance against transgender people just recently, in its stance against gay people, and oftentimes its positions regarding women's rights. And I'm not talking about just in the United States, but in developing countries, there are places where Latter-day Saint lobbyists are actively trying to influence the laws of various nations, just through cultural means, through active lobbying. And the church uses money it receives in tithing and also its clout and large membership to achieve these lobbying goals. I also found that probably the most effective way we communicate to the church that we agree with what it's doing is, number one, paying tithing, and number two, attending church. There aren't any spreadsheets that show there's someone raised their hand at Sunday school and say, I disagree with what the church is doing, or say, I disagree with the church's position on transgender rights. What the leader sees is a spreadsheet that says X number of people attended this week and received X number of dollars in tithing. My belief that every time you attend church and every time you pay tithing, you are effectively telling the church, they agree with the position you're in, the direction you're going. That may be the case as much with you individually because you're a loud voice, but for the vast majority of the membership of the church, the best way they can tell the church that they agree with what they're doing is attending and by paying. And so my question is, you know, a lot of the people I see on Facebook or on Twitter who say things like, I appreciate Julie Hanks because she's helped me realize that I can both attend church, be an active member, be a tithe-paying temple record holder, and support gay rights and support transgender rights. But it seems to me that by attending that church and by paying money to the church, they are actively and in a very real sense fighting against those things. And that puts you in an interesting position. You know, you mentioned you have a personal value of social justice, and I think like a personal value of social justice. I wonder if you wouldn't mind addressing the ethics involved in helping people feel comfortable adopting both of those positions when attending church and paying tithe to the LDS Church is actively fighting against those core values of social justice.
Yeah, you bring up really, really great points.
Julie, before you answer, caller, I'm going to hang up with you, by the way, and I'm going to try to solve the issue while Julie's answering the question. So thank you so much. Can you sort of restate the kind of the question he's asking before you answer it? Is that fair? It's just hard to make out.
Yeah. Yeah. What I heard was, in a nutshell, people say that I've helped them stay in the church, know that they can stay in the church and fight for social justice. But he's saying by staying in the church, attending and paying tithing, that's actually fighting against social justice because the church is not fighting for social justice. RFM, how'd I do?
It sounded good to me.
Okay, that's kind of what I got. And again, I am not trying to keep people in the church. I don't care. I'm indifferent. If they choose to stay in the church, I am trying to help them get out of black and white thinking. I am trying to help them move from external to internal authority as kind of their main source of agency. So, I mean, I'm not responsible for what they do. I'm responsible for what I choose to do. I can see how they would think that, because that is going against what the church teaches by saying, I can stay and I can fight. I can say I disagree, or I can use my voice on social media, or I can raise my hand. I mean, just that thinking alone goes against what the church teaches, that you have to be all in or all out, like no middle ground. And so, in a way, I totally hear what you're saying, and I have no control over what people do. I can only control what I choose to do and where I choose to put my donations. But I am trying to challenge the black and white thinking, which is a step in the right direction, I think.
Right. And I'm not saying that Eric was proposing this, but of course, for you to advise people to stop going to church would be just as unethical as for you to tell them to go back to church.
Exactly.
I know Bill disappeared. I think he's trying desperately to fix the call-in studio.
Yeah.
There was a comment in the chat, or a question in the chat. Would you like me to read that?
Yeah, that'll be great.
Okay, let me see if I can find it now. It was, what do I think about the church's statement about the recent media, like the secret lives of Mormon wives? Any thoughts on the church's recent statement? I think it's fascinating that they chose to even acknowledge it, because it really gives more. It's like people go, "Oh, what is this? This sounds interesting." I think I'd rather comment on members' responses online to, like, these aren't real Mormons. These are, if you really talk to me, if you want to know what a real Mormon woman does. And I just think that's so fascinating, because media and news and reality TV is about exceptions, not like the real lives of Mormon wives would be a horrible reality show. Nobody wants to see driving a carpool and like what's for dinner and scripture study. That would be so boring. So I want to say, like, well, of course it doesn't represent the majority of women, because that would be a really boring show. And then I also think, like, Mormonism is all about exceptions. Like, why are we having a problem with this group of women who are, possibly the exception, and they're swinging and drinking and still going to church? And, Mormonism's all about exceptions, right? Like, we are the exception. Joseph Smith had exceptional experiences. And anyway, so I just think it's kind of amusing that people are so up in arms about, like, this isn't representative of us. It's not supposed to be representative of all Mormon wives, but these are real people who are affiliated with the Mormon Church, so they get to call themselves Latter-day Saints if they want to.
Love it. I'm not going to be able to get the third phone call on. I tried and I failed miserably.
And they type it.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, if somebody did call in and they want to send a question, they certainly can. Otherwise, we can certainly just work towards the end of the show. But I did have somebody reach out to me and say that after the show is over, we'll go into a little conference call and see if they can't help me solve this problem. But
great!
It's been really bad the last few weeks. Julie, I want to give you a chance. If there's anything, if you want to point people towards your podcast, if you want to point people towards a specific book you've written, if you want anything you want to share that would help connect people with you and your work, I want to give you a few minutes to say whatever it is you want to say about that.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah.
So I'm at Dr. Julie Hanks, Dr. Julie Hanks on social media. drjuliehanks.com is my website. And Wasatch Family Therapy is my therapy practice, and I have 3 locations in Utah. And we also have therapist license in California, Idaho, Arizona, Montana, and I think that's it. Yeah, so we do some virtual therapy. But I also have a monthly group coaching for women with an LDS background, and we talk about a variety of topics, emotional, mental health topics, relationship topics, with the knowledge that everyone in the group has an LDS background. So it's not a faith transition focused group. It's just kind of knowing that that's the lens that everyone's coming from. And I also do periodic faith transitions groups. I have one coming up, a women's support group for people who are going through a faith expansion, faith journey, whatever you want to call it, that starts in September. So I love working with the LDS community, particularly women. And that's just part of why I'm on the planet. And so thanks for having me on the show tonight and letting me share some of my thoughts. And I appreciate the work that you both do.
Awesome. Very much appreciated. Any thoughts from you, RFM, before we close out the show?
I think it's been a great show, and really great getting to know Dr. Julie Hanks. She's absolutely fantastic. And I wish you great success in your future efforts to help out with mental health, especially among women, and even more especially among Mormon women.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent, Julie. I appreciate very much you coming on tonight. And I think these are conversations that need to happen. The church can't do what it used to do, which is say what it says is the law, and nobody has any space to sort of respond to that. And anybody who does sort of gets in trouble. And if we're going to move into the next century and beyond, this thing has to figure out ways to not disrupt people in ways that traumatize them or hurt them. And I think you're one of the voices that's sort of helping us figure that out in the here and now. And so thanks so much for coming on tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Excellent, folks. Thank you to all of you who support the program. Please check us out. We'll be Friday at 8 p.m. We will have our next episode of Mormonism After Dark. So grab a stiff drink, get ready for a little more jazz music, and come check out the YouTube exclusive 18 plus show where we talk about Mormonism, take a lot of phone calls. I'll try to have the problem solved by then. And we'll have a chance to talk about anything else that seems interesting to you guys at the moment too. And then otherwise, we'll see you next week, Wednesday, 6:20 p.m. Mountain Time, for the next episode of Mormonism Live. Julie, thank you. Listeners, thank you very much. And have a great night, everybody. RFM, take it easy.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thanks. Good night.
That didn't work. Let me try that again.